From the Gospel of Matthew, please hear these words. Jesus said, "And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward."
I wish everyone could visit Kenya, Africa, and go on the World Vision trip that I did. The trip was educational. It was very emotional. It was, I would describe as a mountaintop experience.
When I think about, and I do, I'm a pastor as well, when I think about what it would mean to live a life that Christ would have us to live, the local World Vision staff over there, their lives just exuded that. Again, there was an overwhelming sense of humility, very much compassion for the people that they worked with. You know, when you hear about blessed are the meek, for I think it's they shall inherit the earth, that's exactly who I think that Christ is speaking about. And again, there was that willingness to give of themselves, anything that they could do, and yet they were humble, but they were very strong. They were very, again, like I said, committed to the people that they're working with, and they never seemed to be put out. They were just always there for us in any way that they could be. So, just great folks.
World Vision and Wellspring have a tremendous relationship. Wellspring has the opportunity to raise funds for World Vision. World Vision digs the wells, does all of the infrastructure work, groundwork, and so on. And so the two work hand in hand as partners, and it's just a tremendous, tremendous group. And along with those four groups that are so active in all the projects, the national, county, village, and World Vision, that team is just phenomenal. Our money is just used extremely wisely in all of those areas.
Lori and I have been supporters of World Vision itself for well over 30 years. And so this partnering with Wellspring has really just confirmed what it is that we've been doing, and having that opportunity then to really see the difference that those funds are making in people's lives each and every day.
It's near impossible for these people to lead healthy, productive lives without clean water.
That's the reason that we give, and I hope we can increase our giving. I really do.
This is why I give to Wellspring. The need is really great.
Whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones. I discovered that that is a lot more complicated than one might think. As we were traveling from Nairobi to Matumo, which was the village that we were stationed at, which was about, I think, a 5-hour journey. In my mind, it's like a 9 or 10-hour journey, but I think it was only 5 hours. We passed through some of these little community centers. If you put up the first picture, Bill. They were kind of like this. They would just be like almost like little strip malls. And there's another picture that might even show it a little bit better, where people would come and sell their things. But in some of these fronts of these little shop fronts, there was hanging like a ton of clothes and shoes. And a lot of it said like I Heart New York or things like that I knew came from our country. I mean, they weren't making that there. And so I asked Chris, where did all this clothes come from? I mean, it was like an abundance of clothes and shoes. And he told us that when the tsunami hit Southeast Asia in 2004, many container loads full of clothing were shipped to that area from the United States and from other places around the world. Much more than there was a need for clothing in that area. And so a lot of those container loads got diverted to other ports in the area, and one of those ports was in Kenya. And so container loads of free clothing suddenly hit the streets and the markets of Kenya, and you know what it did? It gutted their local clothing industry. Because nobody had to buy clothes, it was all just there free. Unintended consequences. are something that we don't often talk about when we talk about charitable giving, but I think it's something important for us to keep in mind. Robert Lupton wrote a book about unintended consequences called Toxic Charity. And that is a charity that makes the person feel really good about giving, but doesn't necessarily do very much good for the person who is receiving that kind of charity. Toxic charity creates dependency. Toxic charity makes people feel like they don't have anything to give, they can only receive. Robert Lupton in his book was trying to help people understand that there are kinds of charity that work really well to improve people's life situations. And then there are kinds of charity that do the opposite of what we think we're doing when we give in that way. And that was really an aha moment for me. And actually I got that book because Chris Pope, our trip leader, recommended that I read that book. And it's not often that a charity recommends that you read a book about the problems with charitable giving, but he did. And it was really an aha moment for me as I looked at all of that clothing and then thought about the people who had been put out of work because we gave. And then I think that others in the group had that same kind of an aha moment later in the week after about 2 or 3 days of visiting with villagers and seeing what is being done and going to some schools and seeing what is happening there. There were people in our group, quite a few, that were really itching to do something. Get involved and do something to help out. Lee mentioned that he felt like he had had enough looking and was ready to do something, to pick up a hammer and pound some nails or fix something or build something or something like that. Somebody else noticed that the bike chains on the School for Special Needs kids were kind of rusty and couldn't we grease and fix up some of those bikes so that they would work better. And our trip leader, Chris, really challenged us every time that came up. And he would say, so we should fix those bike chains because Kenyan people can't do that? They're not capable of fixing bike chains? Or we should pick up a hammer or break some rocks or pour some cement because it would make us feel better, or because we believe that Kenyan people weren't capable of doing those things, that they needed us to come over and do those things for them. And that was really a challenging part of the trip, I think, for some of us. He was very clear with us throughout this whole trip. World Vision does not do anything for people that they can do for themselves. If World Vision were to engage in the type of mission activity that we often think of, the kinds of trips that I have led youth on, where you go and you build something, or if we were to go over there and pour cement or dig trenches or whatever, we could actually be doing harm in 2 different ways. First of all, we could be taking away jobs from people in Kenya, where the unemployment rate is 40%. They don't need people to come in and do their work for them. They need work. And the second way that this could do harm is that it sends the message that they're incapable or unqualified to do things for themselves. I was surprised to discover on my trip, this was a big surprise for me, that the only white American World Vision person that we saw anywhere in Kenya was our trip leader who lives in Minneapolis and does this for World Vision, brings trips of Americans over to different places where World Vision is at work. Every World Vision worker in Kenya, and you can put up this picture if you will. This is many of the workers that we spent a lot of our time with. Every World Vision worker in Kenya is Kenyan. From the director of World Vision activities in Kenya, to the head of their security team, to the village liaisons, to the child protective workers, to the hydrologists and the civil engineers, and everyone else, they are all Kenyans. They are Kenyans solving their own problems. What a healthy model. And I can only echo what Lee said about the dedication that these Kenyan people exhibited to the job that they were doing. Most of the Kenyan World Vision staff that worked at the Mutomo Area Development Project where we were lived 3 to 4 hours away. And they had families, they had lives, but every Sunday night they got on a bus and they took that 4-hour trip out to the village. And every Friday night when their work was done for the week, they got back on that bus and took a 4-hour trip back to their families. And many of them had things that they did in their churches on Sunday mornings that they talked to us about. The other thing I learned was that World Vision is bigger than the United States. That World Vision USA wasn't the only World Vision activity going on in Kenya, that there were area development projects that were supported by World Vision Australia, and World Vision Germany, and World Vision South Korea, and the United Kingdom, and Japan, and Finland, and Canada, and Ireland, and Hong Kong. 10 countries are supporting World Vision's work in Kenya. I realize now as I look back on this whole trip that part of the work that World Vision does, work that Chris was doing with us even before we left Minnesota, is to change our way of thinking. Those of us who are going to be going to another country to visit, we had to have an adjustment in our thinking before we could even go. We had a lot of questions about what we should bring, you know, especially what we could give to the people that we would meet as gifts. And Chris really kind of kept discouraging us from getting too caught up in that. First of all, he said, you are going to go and see need on a level that is so much deeper than any trinkets or stuff that you can pack in a suitcase and give away. So you're going to get there and realize your stuff is really inadequate. That's not going to make much of a difference. But secondly, he said, if we're all caught up in what we're going to give to the people of Kenya, then we're going to miss receiving what the people of Kenya can give to us. And I think that we really experienced the truth of that on our trip. We Americans are rich in stuff. Like, I mean, have you noticed how many storage buildings are going up just so we can store stuff? Because our houses can't hold all the stuff that we think that we need. So now we build storage buildings. And you know, I think I mentioned this a few years ago, that I heard that there's something now when you're designing a new home called the Costco room. It's just to store all the great things you can get at Costco, you know, the bulk that you can get there for when you might ever need it. We have stuff coming out of our ears. The Kenyan people, they don't have any stuff. They don't have any stuff. But they are so rich in relationship. Chris kept saying that our interest in their lives, our asking about their families or their hopes or their dreams would mean so much more to them than any stuff that we could bring them. And we could see that in the ways that they prepared for our visit and in the ways that they welcomed us when we came to their homes. Charity that truly serves the people that it is intended to will do all that it can to preserve the dignity of those people it serves. And healthy mission always realizes that both sides have something valuable to give. We've heard lately a lot about the lack of civility in our society, in our nation lately. And I have to tell you, we saw the opposite of that in Kenya. The villagers that we met, the World Vision staff that we worked with, all exude this idea that relationship is more important than anything. And one thing I noticed was everywhere we went, it was so important that everyone was introduced. From the guys who dug the trenches to lay pipes in, to the hydrologists, to the World Vision workers, to us, to a village mother, to a child, everyone, every single place we went had to be introduced. Everyone's presence was acknowledged everywhere that we went. And there was a sense of kindness and hospitality and respect for one another everywhere that we visited. Now, I'm sure that Kenya isn't perfect at that, but where we were out in the villages, that was very evident. As Lee mentioned in the video, going to Kenya reaffirmed for him and for me in so many different ways that our involvement in funding the work that World Vision does is right and it is good. And as a church, we have been donating to build wells for about 7 years. And I think that we have raised enough money for more than 37 wells, just from this church alone, or the equivalent of that. And it has been exciting for us to think about the number of lives that are transformed because we have been able to do that. And we've been able to do that because when we started, every dollar we raised was matched by 2 other dollars. So our $1 became $3. And the $15,000 that it took to build a well only cost us $5,000 because there were national matching donations. And then a few years ago, it got even better. We had local matching donors through Wellspring so that every dollar we raised was matched here, and then those $2 were matched twice nationally, so our $1 became $6. And $2,500 was enough for another well to go into a village. And that is still the case for us during this 4 Weeks for Water campaign. All the money that we raise will be matched 6 times. And so for every roughly $2,500 that we raise during these 4 weeks, another well will be drilled and 300 to 400 people will have their lives transformed. That means children will be healthier. They will be able to stay in school. Mothers will have time to care for their families. Maybe plant a kitchen garden, start a small business. They won't live with backaches and with headaches from carrying water all the time. There's a poster out in our narthex that talks about the value of clean water, and on that poster, it's right by the kitchen door, there's a little girl dipping her bucket into a pool of dirty water. And I was talking with Carl this week, and he told me that he met that little girl when he went to Africa. Her name is Ruth. And Ruth's village had a hard time getting everybody on board with the sanitation requirements that they had to meet. So it took a little while for them to get their well. And every day, Ruth had to go and dip that water out of that dirty pool and carry that water, that big bucket of water, back on her head. And she's only about 9 or 10 years old. They finally got their well. Finally, the whole village got on board, and they got their well. And somebody asked Ruth, what is the biggest difference in your life now that you don't have to go and walk for that dirty water? And you know what she said? When I go to bed at night, my head doesn't ache from carrying that 5-gallon bucket of water on her head every day. When I go to bed at night, my head doesn't ache. This is life transforming. As I was praying for today, I was aware that the 4th of July will soon be here, and many of you have already have family here. I think I've seen some extra family members here this morning. Some of you have family arriving early this week. I spent some time thinking about what I love about this country. And one of the things that I think makes America great is this: Americans are generous people. I spent a little time looking that up. Do you have any idea how generous we are? According to Giving USA, Americans' generous donations have increased every year for the last several years, and in 2017, we topped, for the first time ever, $400 billion in generous donations. $400 billion. Americans are generous people. Religious organizations get the bulk of those donations. Churches like Hubbard and all of the other churches in our country, we get the bulk of your generous donations. I believe as a church, we have a responsibility to take those donations and to do God's work with those donations. As your pastor, I am well aware that you are very generous people. And I also am careful about the kinds of things that I ask you to donate to. I'm not shy about asking for contributions. Some of you know that. But I am careful about what I ask you to donate to. I want to make sure that the charitable causes that I ask you to be a part of really do work the way they're intended to work, and that people's lives can be transformed as a result of that while their dignity is kept intact. 5 years ago, I asked you to support the work of our annual conference in planting new churches and strengthening existing churches across the state of Minnesota, and you responded to that ask. And to date, we've given more than $32,000 for that cause. And next year is our final year of our 5-year, $40,000 commitment to strengthening churches in Minnesota. And I wish you could all go to annual conference and hear the reports of churches that are doing new things and are beginning to grow again, and churches that had almost given up hope, that have rediscovered that they have a mission and a purpose in their community and in this world. It really is exciting to hear. But I believe that finishing that commitment gives us a special opportunity. And as I said before, we have benefited from matching local donors who have given so that our dollars get matched 6 times. And now I am wondering, and I'm asking you all seriously to pray about this. You have about 2.5 or 3 months to pray about this. Has the time come for Hubbard United Methodist Church to be a local matching donor? Could we commit to giving Wellspring $10,000 a year for 5 years so that other people's donations can get matched 6 times? Could we challenge some of the other churches in our area to get involved in this critical need for clean water around the world, letting them know that we will match their donations so that they get the most bang for their buck as well? I know that that sounds like a lot. If some of you are thinking, holy cow, I know, because it took my breath away when the thought first occurred to me, and several times since then. But then I did some math, and math is not my strong suit, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. If 100 of us, and that's a little more than half of our members, if 100 of us gave up one $2 cup of coffee a week for the next 5 years, and instead committed that money that we would spend on coffee to clean water, we would raise more than $10,000 each year. It's not that hard when you look at it that way. Now, I want you to understand that this would be in addition to our summer Wellspring Giving Day, because I know some of you really look forward to that, and I don't want to take that away from you. This would be a budgeted item, $10,000 in our budget, replacing Reach, Renew, Rejoice with Wellspring. I just want you to pray about it. I'm not asking for anybody to do anything today. Just please pray if that might be what God is calling us as a church to do. And we'll talk about it again in September when we talk about our budget. We, those of us who went to Kenya, we've tried to take you along with us on our journey without the 16-hour plane ride. We wanted to share with you the needs and the gifts of the Kenyan people and why clean water is so life-transforming. And as we come to a close, I am asking you to pray about whether you could increase your pledge to the church budget by a few dollars a year in order to be a part of making clean water possible for everyone. We wouldn't just be raising money to be matched to get a well. We would be encouraging other people to give so that more money could be raised for more wells. And one more thing. I won't ask you for anything that I'm not willing to give myself. Lee and I came home from our trip to Kenya, and we asked World Vision for another child to sponsor. We have one little girl in Mali, and now we'll have another little girl in Kenya. And if we decide at our church conference that we want to do this, that we want to be a matching donor, I will pledge $500 a year for all 5 of those years. Whether the conference leaves me here for 5 years or not, I will pledge $500 toward that $10,000 goal. for all 5 years. Every day on our trip in the World Vision office, we began with devotions. They begin every day with devotions, 5 days a week, no matter how busy their day may be, no matter how far behind schedule we're going to be. And some days we were really behind schedule by the end of the day. They did not cut out their time of devotions. Singing, praying, scripture reading, and a short message. But on the wall of their meeting room where they have their devotions, there is a poster that you cannot help but notice. And that poster says, "Our vision for every child is life in all its fullness. Our prayer for every heart is the will to make it so." Would you please pray with me? Almighty God, we thank you for your great gifts to all of us. We thank you for all the blessings that we enjoy simply from being a part of this country, for freedom to come and go, to worship as we please, for opportunity, for education. The list goes on and on. We also thank you for the ways you have gifted the Kenyan people and for what we can learn from them. Guide our hearts and our prayers, that as a church and as your people, we might always be a part of what you are doing here in our community and around the world. As Jesus taught us, so we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass